I feel like at no point during the entire time that I was researching this was I able to accurately guess what was going to happen next, because it feels like so many things happen so fast. Kaitlyn Coons was 17 years old at the time of this case. She was originally born in Ohio, but she was born into a life that was absolutely terrible. Her biological parents just should have never became parents in the first place, because it was clear from the time that Kaitlyn was a baby that they had zero love for her. Her biological parents were so awful, in fact, that Kaitlyn ended up being taken out of their care and then put into foster care. But her time in foster care, it wasn't easy either. It was very unstable. It did not help with her mental health state. It didn't show her what love is supposed to feel like, nor what a safe family and a safe environment should look like for a child. And because of that, Kaitlyn was constantly running away from different foster homes all the time throughout the years that she was growing up. So by the time that she got to be 14 years old, every aspect in her life felt unstable and she was very unhappy. And I think deep down, like any child would, all Kaitlyn wanted and craved was love and attention, but she never received it. She didn't know what love was supposed to feel like. She had never been shown it, at least not genuine love, and definitely not from the right people. Because at 14 years old, Kaitlyn got romantically involved with a man by the name of Jonathan Jones. And I say man because he was 30 years old. Jonathan Jones was also born and raised in Ohio, and at the time of this case, he was living with his mother, Nicole Jones, at her house, which was in Toledo, Ohio. But Jonathan hadn't always lived at home with his mom. He had previously moved out. In fact, he had met a woman. The two of them started dating. They ended up getting married and then had 2 children together. So he did do the whole move out of your parents' house, start building your own life, your own family, but that didn't last long for him because Jonathan Jones struggled a lot with his mental health. He was in the army from the time that he was 18 years old to the time that he was 22, and after he left the army, he was just never the same. He suffered from horrible PTSD. He had horrible flashbacks. He felt like he was always on edge. He just became a completely different person from a lot of that war-related trauma. His marriage fell apart. His wife decided to keep the children away from him, and all things led to him having to move back in with his mother. So separately, both Kaitlyn and Jonathan were at pretty low points in their life when their paths crossed, which already feels a little bit like a recipe for disaster. But when the two of them met, they met out on the street. They essentially just ran into each other while they were both out. Kaitlyn had once again run away from a foster home. She found herself outside walking around, bumped into Jonathan. They struck up a conversation, and it led to the both of them exchanging their phone numbers. And from then on, they were in constant communication. And for Jonathan, I'm not going to speak on him, but I can imagine that after losing his wife and his kids, meeting someone who showed interest in him, even in the slightest, someone that was willing to give him the time of day, was very intriguing. And for Kaitlyn, someone who had craved love and attention her entire life, meeting someone who was willing to give her that, was something that she saw as really special. But there is a very clear, very disturbing factor here, which is the age difference. Jonathan was more than twice her age. She was 14 years old at the time, very much a child, and he was 30 years old, very much a fully grown adult man. But the two of them just unfortunately didn't consider how off-putting and wrong that really is. He was the adult. He should have never gotten involved with a child in the first place in any way, but he didn't care. And Kaitlyn didn't give it a second thought either. And even though they didn't think that this quote-unquote relationship was wrong, I do want to make it clear that this is weird and this is wrong. But after they exchanged phone numbers, they began texting all the time, then talking on the phone all the time, and then Jonathan started doing things for her, such as buying her gifts, and then eventually progressed to Jonathan helping Kaitlyn sneak out of her foster homes to spend time with him. And then it got to the point where he would not only help her sneak out of these foster homes, but then he would rent a motel room for the both of them to spend the night together. Things did turn physical, and they continued on that way for around a year. And again, for Kaitlyn, not saying this is right because it's not, obviously, but for Kaitlyn, this is quite literally the first time in her entire life that someone had paid attention to her, that showed that they cared for her. And while very, very, very wrong and uncomfortable, it makes sense as to why Kaitlyn would accept this, and she kept agreeing with this, and then it just kept going on that way. Time passes. She is now 15 years old, and around this time, she is slowly but surely losing interest for this thing that her and Jonathan have. Until one day, she tells him, okay, I don't like this anymore. I don't want to do this anymore. I'm out. I'm done. But instead of calling it quits, Jonathan, who I guess at one point was trying to present himself as this sweet, caring guy who really, really cared for her, then showed his true colors. Because Jonathan did not get involved with Kaitlyn because he actually cared about her. He got involved with her for his own benefits because the two of them would do things at motels, and he enjoyed that. So when Kaitlyn was like, okay, I'm done, don't want to do this anymore, he became extremely manipulative, controlling, aggressive, and narcissistic. Essentially, he said, no, you're not. You're going to stay with me, and we're going to keep doing what we have been doing, or else I'm going to hurt myself. Kaitlyn has said that she took back the consent that she had once given him, but that didn't matter to him because apart from tearing Kaitlyn emotionally apart, Jonathan began to essay her. He continued to sneak her out of these foster homes and forced her to stay the nights with him at these motels. He then started taking extremely vulnerable, uncomfortable pictures and videos of Kaitlyn and pictures and videos of them both engaging in certain acts, if you know what I'm saying, and then turning around and selling those on the dark web for a profit. Things are going from bad to worse, and they continue on this way until we got to October of 2022. Kaitlyn is now 16 years old, and I assume that Jonathan is somewhere around 32. And one day he sneaks her out yet again and takes her to a Super 8 motel. But this time is different because Kaitlyn had been struggling a lot with her mental health as well as with her relationship with food. So instead of her being placed in a foster home, she had been taken to a medical facility for treatment. Sneaking out of a foster home is one thing. Sneaking out of a medical facility while you are in the care of the state takes things to a whole nother level. She's reported missing, and authorities are able to track her down, and they find her with Jonathan at this Super 8 motel together. When they were found, obviously authorities immediately knew that something was very wrong. Even though I think that Kaitlyn said that she was okay, I think she even tried giving them a fake name, hoping that they would just let the two of them go, but that did not happen. So Jonathan and Kaitlyn are separated, and authorities talk to Jonathan a little bit more because what the heck is going on here? They take his phone, they look through it, and they find those very disturbing, vulnerable images and videos of Kaitlyn and of the both of them. Quickly figure out that Jonathan had been selling these on the dark web for a profit, and quickly figure out that he's also in his 30s and she is a child. So he gets officially arrested, charged, and then released on bond. He gets charged with a lot because she is a child, because they've done things, because he broke her out of this medical facility, because he had been taking videos and pictures, he's selling them for a profit. He's facing a lot of serious charges. And on top of all of that, he now has another big serious problem because Nicole, his mother, hears for the first time what he has been doing. And she is disturbed, she's angry, furious even. So incredibly shocked and uncomfortable about the fact that her son has been involved with someone so young. She hates everything about it. She's not having it. Need I remind you, Jonathan is also living in her house. So Nicole is not happy, far from it. Jonathan ends up pleading guilty, so there's no trial because he pled guilty, but for whatever reason, while he's out waiting to be sentenced, which I guess in this case was going to take a while, he was just let go. He went home. I mean, he did have an ankle GPS monitor, and he was given a ton of rules and regulations that he had to follow. Biggest one being that he had to stay far away from Kaitlyn. He wasn't allowed to see her, talk to her, be anywhere near her. And with his ankle monitor and his movements being tracked, obviously they were able to tell where he was. So essentially, he was just supposed to stay out of trouble, stay at home and wait for his sentencing trial, right? That did not happen. Kaitlyn and Jonathan continued to communicate regularly, and because he was not allowed to go to her to meet up with her, she started sneaking into his house, which was his mother's house. So they're already breaking literally every single rule that he had. And the rules were all essentially to stay away from each other and stay out of trouble, but they couldn't do that. By February of 2023, Kaitlyn's mental health was at an incredibly dangerous place, and things went from bad to worse when she got in a very bad car accident. She's 17 years old now, gets in this horrible car accident, has to have surgery for this really terrible injury that she suffered. Surgery, stitches, all the things. And then she even had to be put in a coma. She eventually did recover from those injuries, thankfully, but it was after that car accident that things seemed to have taken a very scary turn because something changed after that. Kaitlyn changed, and she had a lot of anger and resentment build up inside of her, all being directed to Jonathan's mom, Nicole. Kaitlyn now did want to be in a relationship with Jonathan. At least I feel like that's safe to assume because she was now the one putting in the effort to go and see him and sneak into his house since he wasn't allowed to go anywhere. And post car accident, Kaitlyn starts putting this narrative in Jonathan's head that it is her and Jonathan against Nicole. She spent most of her days talking to Jonathan about his mom, saying horrible, horrible things about her, telling him over and over and over again that the only thing standing between the two of them being able to be together and have a happy life was Nicole, his mother. Telling him that if it wasn't for Nicole, then they would be able to live happily ever after. That Nicole doesn't want them to be happy, and that she is very much in the way of them living this happy life together. And Jonathan, I mean, I guess he's also incapable of thinking rationally, and he starts thinking, yeah, you know what, you're right. My mom is the problem. At this point, Kaitlyn is living in a group home, but once again, she sneaks into Jonathan's mom's house to live with him, and she's secretly hiding out in his bedroom, I assume. And again, they're spending hours and hours talking about how Nicole is the issue and she is the only issue standing in between the two of them. Not the fact that he is literally waiting to be sentenced to go to prison, right? No, that doesn't matter to them at all, I guess. It's Nicole, she's the issue. April 19th of 2023 was a Wednesday, and that day, Kaitlyn Coons thought that it was time. It was now or never. And she gives Jonathan this ultimatum, which is, You have 5 hours to kill your mom to get her out of the picture completely, or else this thing that we have, it's done, it's over. So it's me or her, and I will give you 5 hours to decide. For the next 6 hours, Kaitlyn and Jonathan are together in person, hiding out at his house. I don't think his mom is obviously aware that Kaitlyn is hiding in his bedroom, but they're in person. They're discussing this inside of Nicole's house. They're having conversations, deciding on whether or not Jonathan is going to go through with this. Mind you, Nicole is at home, the same house, thinking that it's just any other day, having no idea that Kaitlyn has snuck inside of her house and has been pitching her son to kill her for the last however many hours. 6 hours pass. Jonathan doesn't do it. He can't get himself to do it. And Kaitlyn then makes the decision that if he isn't going to, then she is. Kaitlyn Coons walked out of whatever room she was in to find and get a hold of a rock. She then took said rock, found Nicole wherever she was in the house, completely ambushed her, and then took the rock to Nicole's head over and over and over again with a lot of force until Nicole stopped fighting back, and then she was gone. The entire time, Jonathan was hearing what was happening and doing absolutely nothing to stop it. Afterwards, Kaitlyn, with Jonathan's help, wrapped up Nicole's body, dragged her out, and put her body in the trunk of her own vehicle. They drove her to an apartment complex, driving in Nicole's car, and then dumped her body in a dumpster. And then, what did they do? Oh, well, they just went back home. They walked back inside of the house, walked to the kitchen, and made some dinner. They sat down, shared a meal together because, according to them, they finally got rid of the problem and they were able to hang out in peace alone with nobody to stop them. Jonathan and Kaitlyn then stole all of Nicole's money and they fled to Mexico, but of course he had this GPS ankle monitor on him, okay? And Jonathan didn't cut it off until they were in Nicole's car driving to Mexico. Then, in a very weird turn of events, Kaitlyn, which is, I guess, not that weird considering that all of her decisions seem to make no sense because she was clearly in a whack mental state, but Kaitlyn decides to reach out to one of her caretakers and confess to murder. A caretaker back at Kaitlyn's group home received this text message of Kaitlyn claiming that she had killed 2 people, one of them being her boyfriend's mother. That text was what triggered the investigation. Police then realized that both Kaitlyn and Jonathan were missing, and then they did a welfare check to check on Nicole Jones at her home and realized that Nicole was also missing. On May 8th of 2023, approximately 2 weeks after the murder, both Kaitlyn Coons and Jonathan Jones were arrested in Mexico following an international manhunt. U.S. Marshals had an active arrest warrant for Jonathan Jones separately because he ended up skipping one of his court dates, but both were then extradited back to the United States to face charges. What sealed the case was Jonathan's GPS ankle monitor because it tracked their exact movements the night of the murders and in the hours after, corroborating everything that Kaitlyn Coons had confessed to the FBI agents, including the dumpster location in which they got rid of the body. She told them everything. But very sadly, that dumpster, it was a big dumpster in this apartment complex, and it's believed that that trash was later taken to a landfill, and to this day, police have never been able to locate Nicole's body. So her family has never been able to give her a proper burial or to lay her to rest peacefully, which is incredibly sad. Kaitlyn Coons was charged as an adult. She pleaded no contest to a handful of charges, and she was ultimately sentenced to life in prison with eligibility for parole after 25 years. Jonathan Jones was also given so many charges on top of the ones that he was already facing and waiting to be sentenced for. He also pleaded no contest and was sentenced to life in prison with eligibility for parole after 25 years. I don't even know what to say. Shocking, so sad, and once again, completely unnecessary. It is just mind-boggling when people commit these kind of crimes for absolutely no reason at all. I can't understand it. That is it for me today. Thank you for spending time with me today. Let me know your thoughts on this case. I hope you guys are having the best day. If not, go do something to make it the best day. Make somebody happy, and I will see you in my next video. Massive kiss on the forehead to every single one of you.